The Ford's engine coughed like an old man with pneumonia, and I was elbow-deep in its greasy guts when my phone buzzed. Wilder Sornel, 44 years old, tech repair specialist, and apparently the biggest fool in Ohio. That's me. I wiped my hands on a rag that had seen better decades and glanced at the screen. Enjoy poverty. Mira. I stared at those two words until they burned into my retinas. My wife of 22 years, Mira Sornel, successful law partner, mother of our 2 children, had just delivered the most elegant middle finger I'd ever received. The timing was surgical. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon. Fraud alerts, account notifications, employment termination confirmants. They'd coordinated this like a military operation. One moment, I was fixing Mrs. Henderson's laptop. The next, I was unemployed with frozen assets and a text message that felt like a slap across the face. "Dad, are you okay?" Bryn's voice cut through my rage. My 17-year-old son stood in the doorway, concern etched across his face. He'd inherited my dark hair and Mira's sharp cheekbones, but thankfully, none of her recent cruelty. "Just peachy, kiddo." I forced a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. "Your mother's decided to redecorate our lives." From inside the house, I could hear Ivy's voice rising in animated conversation. Our 20-year-old daughter was home from college for the weekend, and based on the snippets I caught, she was discussing her father's apparent inadequacies with someone on the phone. "Mom's finally with a real man," drifted through the kitchen window. "Dad's just pathetic." Nothing like family to keep your self-esteem properly calibrated. I'd been calm about the divorce proceedings, reasonable even. Mira wanted out, claimed she'd outgrown our marriage, needed someone who matched her ambition. Fine. I'd signed papers, agreed to mediation, played the good guy, but this was war. Mrs. Larch from next door was pretending to water her already drowned petunias while craning her neck to catch every detail of my public humiliation. The woman had gossip radar that could track a whispered secret from 3 blocks away. "Trouble in paradise, Wilder?" she called out with false sympathy. "Just engine trouble, Mrs. Larch. Nothing I can't handle." But we both knew I wasn't talking about the Ford. I pulled out my phone again and reread the message. Enjoy poverty. The arrogance was breathtaking. Mira had always been ambitious, but when had she become this cold, this calculating? The answer hit me like a wrench to the skull. Roman Dax, her new millionaire boyfriend, owner of 3 car dealerships, and apparently the architect of my professional destruction. I'd met him twice at Ivy's college events, slick smile, expensive suits, the kind of handshake that crushed bones to establish dominance. My phone buzzed again. Bank notification. Account access suspended pending investigation. Then another. Employment termination confirmed. Final paycheck withheld per company policy. They'd triggered every domino in sequence. Someone had called my employer with fraud allegations, initiated bank holds, and probably had my credit cards canceled before lunch. This wasn't random spite. This was systematic demolition. "Dad?" Bryn stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mom took most of her stuff yesterday. She left some boxes in the basement." I nodded, trying to process the logistics of my own ambush. "Did she say anything about where she was going?" "Roman's place, the big house by the lake." Bryn's expression darkened. "She asked if I wanted to come, but what?" "She said you'd probably be moving somewhere smaller soon, somewhere more appropriate for your situation." My situation. Right. I walked into the house, past Ivy, who was now live streaming something on her phone about family drama and fresh starts. The kitchen still smelled like Mira's expensive coffee, the kind that cost more per pound than I used to make in a day. In the basement, I found her boxes, mostly old electronics, photo albums, and random household items she'd deemed unworthy of her new life. But there, at the bottom of a box labeled miscellaneous, was her old iPhone. The one she'd replaced 2 years ago, and forgotten about. I powered it on, still had charge, still connected to our home Wi-Fi, and most importantly, still synced to her cloud account because she'd never bothered to disconnect it. "You magnificent, arrogant woman," I whispered. The device was a time capsule of her recent activities. Messages, banking alerts, location logs, photos, everything automatically downloaded and time-stamped. I didn't need to hack anything or break any laws. She'd literally handed me the keys to her digital kingdom and forgotten about it. I scrolled through recent messages between Mira and Roman. The planning was all there, laid out in black and white. Instructions to my former employer about irregularities in my work. Coordination with her bank contacts to flag my accounts. Even discussions about the timing of her text message for maximum psychological impact. "Wilder's always been weak," she'd written to Roman 3 days ago. "This will break him completely." Roman's response: "Good. I want him out of the picture before we make anything official. We can't have anything dragging down our image." Our image. They'd been planning this for months. I connected the phone to my laptop and began downloading everything. Messages, call logs, photos, location data, all of it legal since she'd signed a device management agreement years ago when we'd set up family sharing. I'd kept the paperwork in our filing cabinet, right next to the custody agreements that listed shared electronics as joint property. The scope of their conspiracy was impressive. Mira had used her legal connections to orchestrate my firing, while Roman had leveraged his business relationships to freeze my assets. They'd even planned the timing to coincide with Ivy's weekend visit, ensuring maximum family drama. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I wasn't the weak, defeated husband they expected. I was a tech specialist who understood systems, documentation, and evidence preservation. I was also a man who'd just discovered that his wife and her boyfriend had declared war on his entire existence. Time to show them what a real villain looked like. Monday morning arrived gray and bitter, much like my mood. I'd spent the weekend methodically documenting every message, every transaction, every coordinate logged on Mira's old phone. The picture that emerged was uglier than I'd imagined. They hadn't just orchestrated my firing. They'd sabotaged 3 potential job interviews by calling my references with concerns about my character. Roman had used his connections to spread rumors about my work ethic throughout the local tech community. Mira had leveraged her legal network to ensure I'd be unemployable in any position requiring background checks. It was systematic character assassination, and they'd documented every step of it in their messages. I drove to the police station in my wheezing Ford, the old phone and a USB drive full of evidence on the passenger seat. Detective Dana Marsh was a no-nonsense woman in her late 30s who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else when I explained my situation. "So your wife left you, and you're upset about some text messages?" she said, barely glancing up from her paperwork. "It's not about the divorce," I replied, sliding the evidence folder across her desk. "It's about conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false reports, and coordinating financial crimes." That got her attention. I walked her through the timeline, how Mira and Roman had contacted my employer with fabricated allegations about client data theft, how they'd triggered fraud alerts on my accounts using inside information from Mira's banking connections, how they'd systematically destroyed my professional reputation to clear the path for their relationship. "This phone contains all their communications," I explained. "Message threads, banking confirmations, location logs that prove they were together when each false report was filed. They even discussed the timing of the text message to ensure maximum psychological impact." Detective Marsh examined the phone, then looked at me with new interest. "How did you obtain this device?" I produced the device management agreement Mira had signed, along with the custody paperwork listing shared electronics. She left it behind and never revoked access. Everything was downloaded automatically through legal cloud synchronization. She spent an hour reviewing the evidence while I waited in an uncomfortable plastic chair. When she finally looked up, her expression had shifted from skepticism to professional interest. Mr. Sornel, this is quite extensive. We'll need to verify the authenticity of these communications, but if everything checks out, you may have grounds for multiple charges. What kind of charges? Conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false police reports, criminal harassment, possibly financial crimes depending on how they accessed your banking information. She paused. Are you prepared to testify if this goes to court? Absolutely. As I drove home, my phone rang. Mira's number. Wilder, we need to talk. Her voice was tight, controlled, the tone she used when negotiating settlements. But I could hear something else underneath. Uncertainty. About what, Mira? Your text was pretty clear. Don't be dramatic. I heard you went to the police. That's unnecessary. Unnecessary? I pulled into my driveway, noting Mrs. Larch's curtains twitching. You destroyed my career, froze my assets, and told me to enjoy poverty. What part of that doesn't warrant police involvement? We can work this out privately. There's no need to involve the authorities, the legal system. You mean the same system you used to coordinate my professional execution? Silence on the line. I know about the phone, Mira. I know about everything. Her intake of breath was sharp. That's marital property. You had no right. Actually, I had every right. Check your signature on the device management agreement. Check the custody paperwork. You might be a lawyer, but apparently you're not a very careful one. Wilder, listen to me. I hung up. 30 minutes later, Roman's BMW pulled into my driveway. He emerged wearing a $1,000 suit and an expression that suggested he was used to intimidating people into submission. At 48, he was built like the boxer he'd apparently been in college. Broad shoulders, thick neck, hands that looked capable of serious damage. I met him at the front door, making sure to stay visible from Mrs. Larch's window. If he wanted to make threats, he could do it on camera. Sornel. His voice was gravelly, like he gargled with concrete. We need to discuss your recent activities. Which activities would those be, Roman? The police visit, the harassment of my girlfriend, the theft of private property. Theft? I laughed. You mean the phone your girlfriend abandoned in my basement? The one she legally gave me access to? The one containing evidence of your conspiracy to destroy my life? His jaw tightened. You're playing with fire, little man. Little man? I stepped closer, close enough to smell his expensive cologne. That's funny, coming from someone who needed to coordinate with a lawyer just to take down an unemployed tech guy. Roman's hand shot out and grabbed my shirt, pulling me close. You think you're clever? You think your little evidence collection means anything? I've got lawyers who eat guys like you for breakfast. Maybe, but do they eat guys like Detective Dana Marsh? Because she seemed pretty interested in your message threads. He released me with a shove that sent me stumbling backward. This isn't over. You're right, I called after him as he stalked back to his BMW. It's just getting started. That evening, Bryn found me in the basement, organizing evidence files on my laptop. Dad, there's something you should know about Mom and Roman. I looked up from the screen. What's that? I overheard them talking last week before she moved out. Roman was saying something about how you'd never see it coming, how they'd make sure you couldn't fight back. Did he say anything else? Bryn hesitated. He said you were too stupid to be dangerous, that you'd just roll over and take it like you always do. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. Is that what you think, Bryn? That I always just roll over? I used to, but not anymore. He gestured at the evidence spread across my desk. This is different. You're different. He was right. The old Wilder would have accepted his fate, maybe hired a lawyer to negotiate a better settlement, tried to rebuild quietly. But the old Wilder hadn't been systematically destroyed by the two people who were supposed to love him most. The new Wilder understood that sometimes the only way to win was to become the villain they'd accused him of being. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, or things get worse for you. Final warning. I screenshotted the message, added it to my evidence file, and smiled. They wanted to play hardball? Fine. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail. I was the one with nothing left to lose. The next morning brought a surprise visitor. Ivy stood on my doorstep at 8 a.m., looking like she hadn't slept. Her usually perfect makeup was smeared, and her designer clothes were wrinkled. "We need to talk, Dad." I let her in, noting how she avoided eye contact. "Coffee?" "Sure." She perched on the edge of the couch like she was ready to bolt. "I heard about the police thing. Mom's freaking out." "I imagine she is." "She says you're trying to destroy her career out of spite, that you can't handle her being happy." I poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. "What do you think, Ivy?" "I think—" She paused, staring into her cup. "I think I don't know what to think anymore. Mom showed me some of the messages you supposedly collected. They seem pretty bad." "They are bad. Your mother and Roman systematically destroyed my career and finances to clear the path for their relationship. They documented the entire conspiracy in text messages." Ivy looked up sharply. "That's not what Mom said. She said you were harassing her, stealing her private communications. From a phone she abandoned in our basement, a phone she gave me legal access to years ago." I pulled out the device management agreement. "Here's her signature, Ivy, right next to mine." She examined the document, her frown deepening. "But why would they do all that? Why not just get divorced normally?" "Because normal divorce proceedings take time. They wanted me gone immediately, completely destroyed, so I couldn't interfere with their new life together." "That's—" She shook her head. "That's really messed up, Dad." "Yes, it is." My phone rang. Detective Marsh. "Mr. Sornel? We've verified the authenticity of the communications you provided. We'd like you to come in this afternoon to give a formal statement." "I'll be there." After I hung up, Ivy was staring at me with something that might have been respect. "They're really in trouble, aren't they?" "They put themselves in trouble. I just documented it." She was quiet for a long moment. "Mom wants me to post something on social media about how you're harassing her, trying to ruin her reputation out of jealousy." "Are you going to?" "I don't know. Maybe. She's still my mom." "She is, and I'm still your father. But that doesn't mean we have to enable each other's mistakes." Ivy left without committing to anything, but I could see the wheels turning. She'd always been smart, too smart to ignore evidence when it was laid out clearly. That afternoon I sat in an interview room at the police station, walking Detective Marsh and a prosecutor through the timeline of Mira and Roman's conspiracy. They were particularly interested in the coordination between Mira's false allegations and Roman's financial maneuvers. "This level of planning suggests premeditation," the prosecutor noted. "They weren't acting impulsively. This was a calculated attack on your livelihood and reputation." "The text message about enjoying poverty was just the finishing touch," I agreed. "They wanted to make sure I understood how completely they'd destroyed me." "Well, Mr. Sornel, I think they're about to understand something themselves." Detective Marsh closed her notebook. "We'll be filing charges tomorrow. Conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false reports, criminal harassment, and financial crimes. Are you prepared to testify?" "Absolutely." As I left the police station, my phone buzzed with a call from Mace Rodriguez. No, wait, I needed to avoid that name. From Mace Thompson, my old friend who owned a boxing gym downtown. We'd known each other since high school, and he was one of the few people who'd seen through Mira's polished exterior from the beginning. "Wilder. Heard you're finally fighting back against the Ice Queen. News travels fast. Small town, big mouths. You want to grab a beer, celebrate your transformation into a proper villain?" I met Mace at Murphy's Bar, a dive that served beer in bottles and minded its own business. He was waiting in a corner booth, grinning like he'd won the lottery. "Never thought I'd see the day," he said as I sat down. "Wilder Sornel, taking no prisoners." "They left me no choice." "Bullshit. You always had choices. You just finally made the right one." He raised his bottle. to becoming the villain they said you were. We drank in comfortable silence for a moment before Mace leaned forward. So, what's next? They're not going to take this lying down. I know. Roman's already made threats. Mira's trying to spin this as harassment. Let them try. You've got evidence, you've got the law on your side, and you've got something they don't. What's that? Nothing left to lose. That makes you dangerous. He was right. The old Wilder had been cautious, compromising, always worried about maintaining relationships and keeping peace. The new Wilder understood that sometimes peace was just another word for surrender. My phone buzzed with a text from Ivy. Saw the news about the charges, Mom's crying, Roman's yelling. This is really happening, isn't it? I typed back, yes, it's really happening. Are you okay with destroying them? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. They destroyed themselves. I just documented it. That night, I sat in my basement office, reviewing the evidence files one more time. Every message, every transaction, every coordinate was time-stamped and verified. The case was airtight. But I knew this was just the beginning. Mira and Roman wouldn't go down quietly. They'd fight back, try to discredit me, maybe even attempt to destroy what little I had left. The difference was, now, I was ready for them. Now I understood the rules of the game they'd been playing all along, and I intended to win. The charges were filed on Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, my phone was buzzing with calls from reporters, neighbors, and former colleagues who'd suddenly remembered my existence. The local news picked up the story. Local lawyer and businessman charged in conspiracy against ex-husband. Mira's law firm issued a statement distancing themselves from her actions. Roman's dealerships were suddenly under investigation for irregularities in their financing practices. The dominoes were falling faster than I'd expected, but they weren't going down without a fight. Friday morning, I discovered my truck's tires had been slashed. All 4 of them, clean cuts that spoke of deliberate sabotage rather than random vandalism. A note was tucked under the windshield wiper. This is just the beginning. I called Detective Marsh, who sent a patrol car to document the damage. The officer was young, eager, and clearly excited to be working a case that involved actual evidence. Any idea who might have done this, Mr. Sornel? I have suspicions, but I'll let the investigation speak for itself. I had the truck towed to a garage and called Mace for a ride. He arrived in his battered pickup, took one look at the scene, and whistled low. They're escalating. Looks that way. You scared? I considered the question seriously. A month ago, the answer would have been yes. The old Wilder would have been terrified of retaliation, would have considered backing down to avoid further conflict. No, I said finally. I'm not scared. I'm focused. Mace grinned. Good. Fear makes you stupid. Focus makes you dangerous. We drove to his gym, a converted warehouse that smelled like sweat and determination. The place was filled with fighters training for upcoming matches, their coaches shouting instructions over the rhythmic pounding of heavy bags. You ever think about getting back into boxing? Mace asked as we watched a pair of middleweights spar. Not really. Why? Might be good for you. Channel some of that anger into something productive. I watched the fighters dance around each other, looking for openings, waiting for the right moment to strike. I think I'm channeling it just fine. My phone rang. Unknown number. Wilder? The voice was female, nervous. This is Janet Pike from your old company. I heard about the charges. Janet had been my supervisor, a decent woman caught between corporate politics and actual work. Hi, Janet. I wanted you to know, the allegations against you were bogus. We all knew it. But the pressure from above was intense. They said if we didn't terminate you immediately, the company could face legal liability. Who applied the pressure? I can't say over the phone, but if the police want to talk to me, I'll tell them everything. After I hung up, Mace was studying my expression. Good news? Confirmation. My old supervisor wants to testify about the pressure they received to fire me. Your case just got stronger. Their situation just got worse. That evening, Bryn came home with interesting news. He'd been at a friend's house when Roman had shown up, apparently looking for information about my activities. He was asking weird questions, Bryn reported, like where you go during the day, who you talk to, whether you've been acting strange. What did your friend's family tell him? Nothing. His dad actually told Roman to leave or he'd call the police. Said he didn't appreciate strange men asking about minors. Smart family. But Roman's behavior was escalating beyond simple intimidation. He was actively gathering intelligence, possibly planning something more serious than slashed tires. I spent the weekend installing security cameras around my property. Nothing fancy, just basic surveillance equipment that would record anyone approaching the house. If Roman wanted to play games, I'd make sure we had documentation. Monday morning brought another surprise visitor. Mira's best friend and law partner, Jennifer Walsh, stood on my doorstep wearing an expression that could freeze coffee. We need to discuss this situation, Wilder. What situation would that be, Jennifer? Your vindictive campaign against Mira. This has gone far enough. I invited her in, curious about her angle. Jennifer had never liked me. She'd made that clear over the years with subtle comments about Mira settling for less than she deserved. Mira made a mistake, she continued, settling into my living room like she owned it. The text message was inappropriate, but destroying her career over a moment of poor judgment is excessive. A moment of poor judgment? I pulled out my laptop and opened the evidence files. Jennifer, they planned this for months. Look at these message threads. Look at the coordination between false allegations and financial attacks. This wasn't a moment of anything. This was a sustained campaign. She glanced at the screen, and I saw something flicker in her expression. Recognition? Guilt? Where did you get these messages? From a phone Mira abandoned in my basement. A phone she gave me legal access to years ago. That's an invasion of privacy. That's evidence of conspiracy. There's a difference. Jennifer stood abruptly. You're making a mistake, Wilder. Mira has powerful friends, people who don't appreciate seeing her attacked by a bitter ex-husband. Is that a threat, Jennifer? It's a warning. Back off or face the consequences. After she left, I reviewed our conversation. Something about her reaction to the messages had seemed off. She'd recognized them, not just their content, but their existence, like she'd seen them before. I scrolled through Mira's message history more carefully, looking for communications with Jennifer. What I found was interesting. Gaps. Periods where Mira had clearly been texting someone, but the recipient's information was missing from the logs. Either Mira had been deleting specific conversations, or she'd been communicating through a different app. But why would she hide conversations with her best friend and law partner? Unless Jennifer wasn't just a friend. Unless she was a co-conspirator. I called Detective Marsh with my suspicions. She listened carefully, then asked me to forward any evidence related to Jennifer's potential involvement. We'll look into it, she promised. But be careful, Mr. Sornel. If Ms. Walsh is involved, she has access to legal resources that could complicate things. Let them complicate. I'm not backing down. That night, I sat in my basement office, studying the evidence files with new eyes. If Jennifer was involved, there would be traces, financial connections, timing correlations, something that tied her to the conspiracy. And if I found those traces, the scope of this case would expand far beyond a bitter divorce. It would become something much larger, much more dangerous, but also much more satisfying to destroy. Tuesday morning brought vindication in the form of a phone call from Detective Marsh. The investigation into Jennifer Walsh had uncovered some interesting connections. Ms. Walsh's law firm handled the legal paperwork for several of Roman Dax's business acquisitions, she reported, including some recent transactions that coincided with your employment termination. That's not necessarily suspicious. Lawyers handle business deals. True. But the timing is interesting. And we found something else. Ms. Walsh has been in significant financial difficulty recently. Her partnership in the law firm was under review due to some questionable billing practices. The picture was becoming clearer. Jennifer hadn't just been helping her friend destroy an inconvenient ex-husband. She'd been positioning herself to benefit from Mira and Roman's new relationship, possibly hoping to secure lucrative legal work from Roman's expanding business empire. There's more, Detective Marsh continued. We executed a search warrant on Ms. Walsh's office yesterday. Found communications between her, your ex-wife, and Mr. Dax that go back 8 months. She wasn't just aware of the conspiracy, she helped plan it. 8 months. They'd been plotting my destruction since before Mira had even filed for divorce. What's the next step? We're filing additional charges against Ms. Walsh, and we'd like you to come in this afternoon to review some of the evidence we recovered. I spent the morning at the police station, going through boxes of documents seized from Jennifer's office. The scope of their conspiracy was breathtaking. They hadn't just targeted my job and finances. They'd systematically worked to destroy my reputation throughout the local business community. Jennifer had used her legal connections to spread rumors about my professional competence. Roman had leveraged his business relationships to ensure I'd be blacklisted from potential employment. Mira had coordinated with her banking contacts to flag my accounts for suspicious activity. They'd even discussed strategies for turning my children against me, with Jennifer suggesting ways to document my supposed instability for custody proceedings. This is personal destruction as a legal strategy, the prosecutor noted. They weren't just ending a marriage, they were trying to erase you entirely. Why go to such extremes? Control. They wanted to ensure you'd never be in a position to interfere with their plans. A desperate ex-husband with nothing left to lose is unpredictable. A completely destroyed ex-husband is harmless. Except they'd miscalculated. Instead of destroying me, they'd transformed me into something more dangerous than they'd imagined. That afternoon, I drove to Roman's main dealership. Not to confront him, that would be counterproductive, but to observe, to understand his operation, to look for weaknesses. The place was impressive. Gleaming showroom, expensive cars, professional sales staff. Roman's office was visible through glass walls on the second floor, and I could see him gesticulating angrily while talking on the phone. "Can I help you?" A young salesman approached with a practiced smile. "Just looking. Heard good things about this place. Best dealership in the county. Mr. Dax runs a tight operation." "I'm sure he does. Must be stressful, though, with all the recent legal troubles." The salesman's smile faltered. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, the conspiracy charges, fraud allegations, that sort of thing." I gestured toward Roman's office. "Tough time to be in business with someone facing federal investigation." "Federal investigation?" The salesman looked genuinely confused. "You didn't know? Check the news. Roman Dax, conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false reports. Makes you wonder what else he might be hiding in his business practices." I left the salesman looking troubled and drove home. By evening, my security cameras had captured 3 different cars driving slowly past my house. Roman's BMW, Jennifer's Mercedes, and a third vehicle I didn't recognize. They were watching me now, trying to anticipate my next move. Good. Let them waste time and energy on surveillance while the legal system ground through their cases. Bryn came home with more interesting intelligence. Ivy had called him, apparently in tears, after discovering some of the evidence against her mother. "She found out about the messages discussing us," Bryn reported. "The stuff about turning us against you for custody purposes. She's pretty upset." "How upset?" "Upset enough to move back home. She's driving down from college tomorrow." That was unexpected. Ivy had been firmly in Mira's camp since the divorce proceedings began. If she was reconsidering her position, It meant the evidence was having an impact beyond the legal system. Wednesday morning, Ivy arrived with 2 suitcases and red eyes. She hugged me awkwardly, like she wasn't sure how to bridge the gap her previous loyalty had created. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't know about all the planning, all the coordination. I thought Mom was just moving on." She was moving on. She was also destroying everything in her path to clear the way. The messages about me and Bryn were the worst part, using us as weapons against you. She wiped her eyes. "That's not love. That's manipulation." We spent the morning talking through the evidence, the timeline, the scope of the conspiracy. Ivy was a communications major. She understood social media, reputation management, the power of coordinated messaging campaigns. "They were running a full-scale character assassination operation," she said after reviewing the files. "This is like corporate warfare tactics applied to a divorce." That's exactly what it was. But why? Why not just get divorced and move on? Why try to destroy you completely? I'd been thinking about that question for weeks. Because they couldn't risk me interfering with their new life. Roman's building a business empire. Mira wants to be part of that empire. And a bitter ex-husband with legitimate grievances could damage their reputation. So they decided to eliminate the threat. They decided to try. That afternoon, Detective Marsh called with an update. Jennifer Walsh had been arrested that morning on conspiracy charges. Her law firm had suspended her pending investigation, and Roman's business accounts were being audited by federal investigators. "It's expanding beyond local charges," she explained. "The FBI is interested in Mr. Dax's business practices, particularly some of his recent acquisitions and financing arrangements." "Federal charges? Possible, but that's beyond our jurisdiction. We're focused on the conspiracy case against you." The web was unraveling faster than they could manage it. Each new investigation revealed additional connections, more evidence, deeper levels of coordination between the 3 conspirators. But I knew this was just the beginning. The legal system would handle the criminal charges, but I had my own justice to pursue. They'd tried to destroy me systematically, professionally, personally. Now, it was my turn to return the favor. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. I arrived at the courthouse early, wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of additional evidence I'd compiled over the past weeks. The media attention had grown beyond local interest. Several regional news outlets were covering the story of the coordinated conspiracy. Mira sat at the defendant's table with her attorney, looking smaller than I'd seen her in years. Her usual confidence had been replaced by something that looked like genuine fear. Roman sat beside her, his expensive suit unable to hide the tension in his shoulders. Jennifer's table was separate, her legal team clearly distancing her from the other defendants. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. The timeline of the conspiracy, the coordination between false allegations, the systematic destruction of my professional reputation. Each piece of evidence was presented with clinical precision, building an overwhelming picture of premeditated malice. When they played the recording of my testimony, the courtroom was silent except for the sound of my voice reading Mira's text message into the record. "Enjoy poverty." The defense attorneys tried various strategies. Mira's lawyer argued that the messages were taken out of context, that the divorce had been emotionally difficult for everyone involved. Roman's attorney claimed his client had merely been protecting his girlfriend from harassment. Jennifer's team insisted she'd been providing standard legal advice to a friend. None of it mattered. The evidence was too comprehensive, too well documented, too clearly coordinated to dismiss as coincidence or emotional reaction. During a recess, Mira approached me in the courthouse hallway. She looked exhausted, defeated in a way I'd never seen before. "Wilder, please. We can still work this out privately. Drop the charges and we'll make sure you're compensated for everything you lost." Compensated? I studied her face, looking for any trace of the woman I'd married 22 years ago. "Mira, you didn't just cost me a job. You tried to erase my entire existence." "I know. I know it went too far, but we can fix this. No, we can't. You made your choice when you sent that text message. You wanted me to enjoy poverty. Now you get to enjoy the consequences. She started to cry then, real tears that smeared her makeup and made her look vulnerable. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The man I married wouldn't do this, she whispered. He would forgive me. You're right. The man you married was weak, trusting, willing to be taken advantage of. But you destroyed him, remember? You created something else instead. When court reconvened, the judge delivered his ruling. All 3 defendants would face trial on conspiracy charges. Bail was set high enough to ensure they'd feel the financial impact immediately. Asset freezes were put in place pending resolution of the criminal cases. Roman's business empire began crumbling within hours. News of the federal investigation had spooked his investors and banking partners. 2 of his dealerships were already facing foreclosure proceedings. The third was operating under court supervision. Mira's law firm formally terminated her partnership and filed suit to recover damages from her misconduct. Her legal career was effectively over. No firm would hire an attorney facing conspiracy charges, and the state bar was reviewing her license. Jennifer's situation was even worse. The FBI had discovered evidence of money laundering through her legal practice, connected to some of Roman's more questionable business deals. She was facing federal charges that could result in decades in prison. That evening, I sat on my front porch with Bryn and Ivy, watching the sunset over our neighborhood. Mrs. Larch had finally stopped her surveillance, apparently satisfied that the drama had reached its conclusion. "So, what happens now?" Ivy asked. "Now we rebuild," I said. "I've got job interviews lined up, the house is paid off, and your college funds were in accounts they couldn't touch." "What about Mom?" I considered the question carefully. "Your mother made choices that have consequences. She'll have to live with them." "Do you hate her?" Bryn asked quietly. "No, I don't hate her, but I don't forgive her either. Some lines, once crossed, change everything permanently." My phone buzzed with a message from Detective Marsh. "Thought you'd want to know? Roman Dax was arrested an hour ago on federal money laundering charges. The FBI found evidence of systematic financial crimes going back 5 years. He's looking at serious prison time." I showed the message to my children. Ivy whistled low. "They really did destroy themselves, didn't they? They destroyed each other. I just documented the process." The trial took place 3 months later. I testified for 2 days, walking the jury through the evidence, the timeline, the systematic nature of their conspiracy. The defense teams tried to paint me as a vindictive ex-husband seeking revenge, but the documentation was too thorough to dismiss. Roman was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. His business empire was liquidated to pay restitution to his victims, a list that had grown substantially once the investigation expanded. Jennifer received 12 years for conspiracy and money laundering. Her law license was permanently revoked, and she was ordered to pay substantial fines and restitution. Mira's sentence was lighter, 3 years in minimum security prison, followed by 5 years of probation. Her legal career was over, her reputation destroyed, her financial security eliminated. During her sentencing, she looked at me one final time. There was no anger in her expression, no defiance, just acceptance of the consequences she'd brought upon herself. The judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I stood, looked at the 3 defendants, and spoke the words I'd been preparing for months. "Your Honor, these 3 individuals didn't just commit crimes against me. They committed crimes against the concept of justice itself. They used their professional positions, their legal knowledge, and their financial resources to systematically destroy an innocent person for their own benefit. They showed no mercy, no conscience, and no remorse until they were caught. I ask that the court show them the same consideration they showed me, none whatsoever." As I left the courthouse for the final time, reporters shouted questions about forgiveness, about moving forward, about whether justice had been served. I didn't answer them. Justice had indeed been served, but not in the way they expected. The real justice wasn't in the prison sentences or the financial ruin. The real justice was in the transformation of a weak, trusting man into someone who refused to be destroyed. They'd wanted to create a victim. Instead, they'd created something much more dangerous. A villain who understood the rules of their game and played it better than they ever could. I drove home to my children, my rebuilt life, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the good guys win by becoming the bad guys their enemies thought they were fighting all along. The poverty they'd wished on me had become theirs instead, and unlike them, I'd earned my victory honestly.